Right, we are looking at factoring. So we last unit talked a lot about multiplying. We started off with multiplying by a monomial, and so this unit we're going to see factoring, which means that we're going to like go backwards. So before we maybe would have like 2a multiplied by a squared plus 3b plus 5, and then we distributed out that out, and so we got 2a cubed plus 6ab plus 10a. Now we're going to look at like how can I go from this here to this factored form, and then later we will learn out like how I can use that. So that's where we're headed with this. So past this is what we just did. So our goal is that you can factor out what's called the greatest common factor. What's the biggest amount that I can take out of each term? So in our polynomial, that is the same thing out of each term. So what we're looking at is what we're going to have to factor so we can see what do they have in common, because it's the greatest common factor, so the biggest amount of factors they have in common. So if I think of like 70, if I factor 70, we can factor it this way where we have all prime numbers. So when we factor numbers, we're factoring out all our prime numbers. So the factors of 70, a factor would be 2 times 5 times 7. 32, then we would factor the number the same way, so factoring it in prime numbers here, and we talked about this earlier. So 32 factors into 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 a, and then 3 b's. So those are all the factors of 32ab cubed. So now we're going to look at, like, if I factor 21, it would be 3 and 7. So those are all prime, a times a. And I factor 35, it is 5 times 7, a. So I notice they have this 7 in common and this 1a in common. So my greatest common factor then would be 7a. So I could divide 21 by 7a and 35 by 7a, and that would give me, they would both go even. This would go evenly into both of those. So 10a would be 2 times 5a, 20a would be 2 times 2 times 4, or 2 times 2 times 5, 2a's, and 25a would be 5 times 5a. So we notice they all have at least 1 5. So my GCF would be 5, and they all have the greatest amount of a's they have in common is 1. So my greatest common factor is 5a. So we got to learn how to find that GCF in order for us to be able to factor it out. So we try this one on your own, and then we just did this. So pause the video, try it, and then I will continue on here so you can continue on. But it's good to try it on your own. So 25 factors into 5 times 5, 40 factors into 2 times 2 times 2 times 5, sorry, and then their great GCF would be 5. 14x factors into 2 times 7x, 21x squared factors into 3 times 7, x times x. So they both have a 7 and they both have an x. So my GCF, greatest common amount they have in common, is 7 and x, 7x. So we are going to, like I said, kind of on distribute. So pass this here. We're going to look at both of these terms then and we're going to factor them. So 15x would factor into 3 times 5 times x, and 25x would x squared would factor into 5 times 5x times x. So I see they both have a 5 and they both have an x, so I get 5x. So when I factor that out, if I factor out a 5x out of this, those were gone, I have 3. And if I factor a 5x out of this, I get 5x. So then this would be it factored. If I multiplied this back out, I would go back to this here, 15x, 25x. So you're going to get to a point where you can find that greatest common factor or see it without writing them this way. And then I can just, like, I can also look at it as like I'm dividing this by 5x. 15 divided by 5 is 3, and then the x's cancel, and this by 5x. So 25 divided by 5 is 5. See that here, and I took out an x. So then that's the same as factoring it out. It's kind of like I divided it by it. It's still here, I just am dividing it out of there. So here I have 3 terms. So I'm going to take each one and I'm going to factor them. So 12xy factors into 2 times 2 times 3, x and y. 24xy squared factors into 2 times 2 times 2 times 3, xy times y. And again, if you need to, you can do it this way where you find all your prime factors. Since we learned that before, I'm not taking that each step by step. And then 30x squared y to the 4th factors into 2 times 3 times 5 with 2 x's and 4 y's. So the greatest amount of 2's in common is 1. The greatest, they all have a 3. And they all have 1x and 1y. So that's what I'm going to factor out is 2 times 3. So my GCF is 2 times 3 times x times y. So 6xy. So, and I can kind of think of that too. Like I said, you're going to get to a point where I can look at 12, 24, and 30, and what's the biggest number that divides into those, and that would be 6. So I'm going to take out a 6xy, so what would be left on this one would be 2. I'm going to keep these signs here. What would be left on this one is 2 times 2, 4, and a y. And left on this one, and I'm keeping this subtraction here, is 5 and 3, 1x and 3 y's. So y cubed. So we really, when we say greatest common factor, we think maybe biggest power, but we're actually taking our lowest power because that's the most that they have in common. So you see that x and y to the 1 power is my lowest power of x and y. And then these are all divisible by 6. So that's also another way to look at your greatest common factor. So try this one, and pause the video, work it out, try it. It's the best thing you can do is if you can try it, especially if you do mess up, then you can go back and look it over and see where you went wrong, and that will help you learn the best. But you should get this a 3xy, x plus 4y. Again, pause video, try it, and then check and see what you get. And that would be D, is the greatest common factor is 3a squared. All right, so we're going to see how we can use this here. A football is kicked into the air. The height of the football in feet after x seconds can be modeled by this expression. Factor the expression, then find the height of the football after 0.3 0.3 seconds. So I look at both of those and they both have a 16, so I know I can pick out a 16 and an x. And let's take out the negative here too. So I would get x minus 1. So I took this negative in that. If I take a negative out of there, it gives me a negative. So when I want to find the height of the football after 0.3 seconds, then you're going to plug in 0.3 in for x here, and then you can solve it. And this is going to be a lot easier to solve when you finish it out. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, go on to your assignment.